This item is for public comments on any regular board meeting agenda items. Not the 1028 hearing, we will open that, and that will be public comment for that. But we have any of the regular board meeting agenda items listed. Okay.
Would you please repeat that? You did not hear it.
That's on.
The mic is definitely on, so we do not need to have it this close. So the statement was, any comments on regular board agenda items? Over here.
curiosity, please, I know from most of the board meetings that I have come to off and on for the last year and a half, could you please give us some kind of a summary of what exactly you're doing as far as a claim docket and a balance sheet? What is it that you guys are looking at that you have evidently discussed or gone over in an executive meeting? We have no idea what the heck you're talking about. So could you give us some kind of a summary on those two items, please?
So our claim dockets are monthly bills that we pay,
Okay,
right?
that's helpful.
All right.
What was it?
Yeah. Trying to make sure we don't feed back here. So we don't meet, first of all, let me address, we don't meet on the claim docket or that information in executive session. The board gets emailed typically the Friday before the board meeting, this board packet. So they've had time to look through the bills and what we're paying, and which is why you might see 4 pages worth of claim information that we briefly looked through. They've had 5 or 6 days to look over that.
Well, that's typical. It's just that it leaves all of us in the dark as to what you guys are doing. And I have to be honest with you, it leads people to distrust if they don't understand what's going on. I'll be honest with you. So if you could just, instead of just a comment here, it's like, what the heck does this mean? So same with the balance sheet. So what you're doing is looking at, this is what the balance is after we make these payments for the month?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, you agree with that?
Yes, and as far as I'm aware, I don't go to a lot of other meetings other than ours, but I know I have friends and people that do. Even when it's not our meetings, if you go to most government institutions, it's the same process that the information is received ahead of time. And then once that's received, they can ask questions ahead of it. They desire to be approved during the meeting to make sure that everybody's getting paid on the claim docket. If there are any questions, that gives the board time to ask the questions.
The claim docket is your monthly bills, like utilities, insurance,
Correct.
workman's comp, things
Right,
like
and
that.
the balance sheet is a summary of our investments, the beginning balance, and any balances.
And so if it's something beyond the regular monthly things, that it's periodic, how is that reflected where we as the community and taxpayers would understand what you're spending money on?
Typically, if it's a sizable consideration of spending money, be it maintenance, for example, on tonight's, one of the items on there is a proposal. I'm going to ask the board for permission to spend $4,800 to have Trimco Roofing do a nuclear scan of any of our membrane roofs. So
Okay.
that's a high dollar item, so I asked board permission for that. So it pointed out specifically, if we've spent $300 or $400 ordering some materials for a kindergarten class, that shows up on the claim docket, but I don't really point
Thank
that
you.
out.
I appreciate you taking time to help me
Sure.
understand that, because if it's on my mind, I know there must be other people here wondering the exact same thing.
I appreciate the question.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
So, since you have the claim docket and the balance sheet in front of you right now, after the meeting is over, would you let members of the public take a look at it?
If I had asked, this is a very large area. We're all being challenged with the school systems and everything to keep everybody safe. So if there are any questions tonight, I think the best thing would be to come up to the microphone. At that point, you can remove your mask if you need to talk. But if you're not coming up to the microphone, we ask you all to have a mask on wherever you're sitting to keep everybody safe. So if you don't have a mask on you, we are under statutes with the education. We want to make sure everybody is safe tonight. So if you're not wearing a mask, please put one on unless you're going out to skate.
My question was, since you guys have the balance sheet in front of you right now, and you have the documents in front of you right now, would you let members of the community,
I'm sorry, with this phone, you can ask.
have the balance sheets in front of you. Would you let members of the public after the meeting come up and inspect those documents?
That is currently being worked on by a school attorney at the time.
So the answer is yes, no.
As far as inspection of the claim documents,
Well, you can prove it on the spot. I mean, it's right in front of you. There's nothing in there you can redact, so why not? Plenty of organizations will just openly set it out. What's the reason not?
You have to ask our attorney.
What's the reason not? Okay, how long might those documents take to produce? If you have them gathered up right now, they're right in front of you. This would be the most convenient opportunity for you to share. There's nothing that needs redacted. It's easy. Why delay? Okay, well then I would really like to request it. I'll pull that up. Are there any additional comments?
No.
We'll move on to the next one. The board meeting scheduled for 2021.
tonight is the second, your second opportunity to look at the board meeting calendar for the proposed 2021, so I'm looking for approval to adopt those dates for our regular monthly board meeting.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion approved.
Next item, I already kind of explained this a little bit, but within the last couple of months, the board had given me approval for Trimco Roofing to do a visual inspection and some mitigating work on our membrane roof systems. So that's everything above this building, the Tiger Den, both cafeterias and barrel style roof, and all of the ballasted roofing at Wanatah. So they did a visual inspection and $5,000 worth of repair work. We were happy with that, so I'm here tonight asking the board to allow them now to do an in-depth nuclear study. And what that does is try to determine how much of the insulation might be wet in that roof, in those roof systems, so that we can decide a plan for repair schedule going forward.
I'll make a motion to approve that.
All in favor? All opposed? Motion approved.
Thank you.
Move approval of the SA budget for the board. All in favor? All opposed? Motion approved.
Do you think you could turn off the furnace, the fan?
I can't turn off the furnace, it's a computer program, sorry, it's program, I'm sorry. If I turn it up more, it will just give you guys feedback, so just move closer to the mic. If I turn it up more, you're just gonna Well, this isn't a Q&A, this is a comment, so that should be saying. Oh, I would hand it. So I move it back over. So, everybody ready?
My apologies. The other half of our dynamic technical duo is home this evening, so he's helping us remotely. But Mr. McMahon tends to know all the little ins and outs of this place much better than I do.
The next item this evening will be the agenda for the board to hold a project hearing on the proposed construction and renovation project. If you are interested in speaking at the hearing, please make sure you have signed the sign-in sheet, which should be in the back. So we need to obtain the sign-up sheet, which should include your name and address. After a presentation by the administration and its advisors, there will be an opportunity for the public to make comments about the project. At the hearing, we will ask that each person limit their comments to 5 minutes and that the topic be limited to the proposed project under consideration. The notice of the project hearing was published as legally required on November 7th of 2020 in the Regional News. So at this time to start, I will ask that Monica Conrad, the Tri-Township Council, to explain the purpose of tonight's hearing.
Good evening, members of the board. Before you, this is the time in which you guys have set aside for what's referred to in the statute as a 1028 hearing. And as part of that 1028 hearing, what you're required to do by statute is to go through an explanation of what you are proposing to do as part of any project. You need to kind of review what the need of that project is, what any kind of possible cost, what the impact of that is. I know you have representatives here to also present to you as well. You've got Jim Elizondo here, who is going to be talking a piece about the kind of the financial part. And you've got your, you guys have looked at already somebody you've engaged for purposes of looking at doing like a criteria developer, and he will also kind of help you with talking through that part of the process as well. You guys have already provided notice of this hearing, which was published in the Regional News that was published on November the 7th in 2020, which is one of the things that you were legally required to do. And then as also as part of this hearing, we will be pursuant to Indiana Code, that's 2026-737. Any time that you are going to be spending more than $1 million to build or repair or alter a school building that's going to end up being financed through any kind of lease or any kind of bond, you're required to go through this process, this hearing process. And in that hearing process, you will detail then what the value and you expect of that project, the value to the community, the value to the school, as well as what you think the value of that cost is as well. At the end then, after you have your public hearing, there are some resolutions that you will be reviewing and determining whether you're going to pass those resolutions or not. And those resolutions then will establish what is considered to be the maximum financial terms for any kind of proposed project. So, and that would come at the very end after you kind of study through the information that you have tonight. In addition to that, in the public hearing portion, you have an opportunity where you're going to receive comment from members of the public, and in that, you're going to need to make sure that anybody who does speak is to direct all comments to the board president, and then you will facilitate those comments. People need to identify themselves. Your policy requires no more than 5 minutes, so as part of that, you're going to need to be a timekeeper for that as well. And then the other thing too, with regard to any kind of hearing or any kind of public comment, there is a requirement for civility and that people remain civil and remain respectful. Those are some of the limits in which that you will take some of that public comment. And so with that, that kind of helps to kind of give you kind of the ground rules, what the procedure is, and what that process is. Right.
So we would now move over to Mr. Kelly Shepherd regarding the process of determining and communicating the project to the community and the need for the project.
Okay, the educational need and history. How did we get here? Change is hard, change is sometimes necessary. Many great things emerge from a willingness to change. What's the current reality of our high school? The current high school facility, while wonderful in a historical context, is lacking for education purposes in 2020. The current building contributes to many concerns, including programming limitations, maintenance costs, marketing viability, and safety concerns. The current building condition and location contribute to many inefficiencies, impacting our course offerings, our maintenance budget, our ability to increase enrollment, and our commitment to the safety of our students. So, what is the educational need of the project at Wanatah? We need to modernize and relocate our high school facility to improve programming. We need to modernize and relocate our high school to improve our long-term financial health, where maintenance costs are concerned. To improve our marketability and therefore enrollment. To reduce redundancy as it impacts our financial future. And last but certainly not least, to improve safety for all of our students. So how did we get here? It's my belief that school leaders some number of decades ago made a decision to live out the life of the high school facility without sinking too much cost into it. I believe it to be common knowledge that talk of moving out of the current facility has surfaced many times in the last several decades. In 2011, Tri-Township Consolidated Schools was born from 2 towns and 3 townships. In March of 2013, the school board stated a vision of wanting to see a K-12 building in Wanatah in no less than 5 years, but no more than 10 years. In 2015, the Tri-Township School Board and Administration commissioned a facility study of La Crosse High School. Representatives from Performance Services presented that information at the March 26, 2015 board meeting. In their review, they stated significant issues exist with its aging infrastructure and a floor plan that was developed for education 100 years ago. In February of 18, the Tri-Township Board and Administration commissioned a tax impact and demographic study conducted by Dr. Robert Boyd from Indiana State University. This was an update of the same study conducted in 2011. Dr. Boyd's study points out, among other things, that Tri-Township is virtually debt-free That's good, but has 164 out-migrated students and a declining population and birth rate to contend with. He concluded that a consolidation with any surrounding school corporation raises our community tax burden significantly. I assumed leadership of the corporation in the summer of 2018. It quickly became apparent to me that we were unwisely overspending on staff based on enrollment. This was true at all levels. I spent the next 6 months studying what needed to be done. The first decision made was to reduce staff at our elementary school. Our numbers did not support having 2 sections at each grade level. I took another year studying the secondary enrollment and financial issue, as secondary right-sizing is made more difficult by credit and graduation requirements. Even after the right-sizing decisions and all the absorption of roles, our basic state grant, which pays for staff based on student enrollment, was still not sufficiently covering our staffing needs. On February 20th of this year, I made a recommendation to the school board regarding my concerns about our current high school facility and all of the impacts it has on our future. Those concerns included facility, budgetary, programming, and enrollment. I informed the board that I believe the solution that addresses all of those concerns is a single campus high school wing on Wanatah's campus. The board concluded that night that we should hold open houses and present the information to the public while letting them see the facility for themselves. Those took place on February 27 and March 4. We presented what a possible addition at Wanatah could look like, how much it could cost, and what impact it would have on taxpayers. From those meetings and ensuing communications, the public requested comparative information. Since we had the information from Performance Services from 2015, we did not request an update on the high school numbers. In the meantime, the Alumni Association commissioned a study from Indiana Landmarks. They commissioned ratio architecture and ton and blank. The school board decided to wait until that study with numbers was completed. On September 17th, we held a public board work session. It was held to allow more of the public to hear my presentation to the board and receive the facts for themselves. On October 22nd, I asked the board for permission to advertise for a 1028 hearing to take place at the regular board meeting in November. On this night, 9 patrons signed in to speak, and approximately a total of about a dozen contributed. The board again decided to accommodate the request of the citizens who requested we hear a presentation of the assessment done by Ratio Architecture. I reached out the next day to Indiana Landmarks and Ratio with an invitation of their choice of 2 days, November 5 or November 12. They chose the 12th. On the 12th, the board heard a joint presentation from Indiana Landmarks and Ratio Architecture, and again fielded questions and dialogue from taxpayers on both sides of the issue. That brings us to this evening, where our board will hear comments from the public again, who have requested to speak for their allotted 5 minutes.
So we'll now hear from Dan Rawlings from the Rawlings Group regarding the proposed project as described by the superintendent.
Thank you. My name is Dan Rawlings. I am an architect. I represent the Rawlings Group. We have served as design criteria developers for the school corporation on the previous 2 additions that were made to the Wanatah School. And we're here to discuss what the scope of the project would be to place the high school at Wanatah and that budget and schedule. So, Mr. Shepherd, you're on keyboard, so if you can hit the button, we'll move forward. What we're talking about is an addition of approximately 7,650 square feet that would include 5 classrooms for a high school wing, some space for student toilet rooms, speech room, intervention room, and then other infrastructure infrastructure that needs to happen to support that addition. A upgrade to the cooling plant for the additional capacity needed, extension of heating, hot water, extension of corridors, storm sewers, sanitary sewers, electrical data communications, all of those kinds of things that are needed to support those spaces. As budget would allow, we could also look at other work in remodeling the school to bring a chemistry lab online, create some office space, student parking, furnishings and equipment. Some of that would be dependent on market conditions and response from the marketplace as to how much of that could be afforded. The addition would certainly happen within the budget that we would have on the next slide. We're talking about a design-build project that's been the same delivery method that has been used on the previous two editions. So one company would provide both design and construction services. I would be serving as a facilitator for that process, so I'm not designing anything, but facilitating the process. And we would have a budget of $2,484,000 for the design builder to do their work, reserve $100,000 for the owner to cover soft costs of contingency, of fees for our services, other equipment and miscellaneous expenses that they would have. And then also there's the cost of obtaining the financing. So the cost of issuance is about $136,000 for a total financing of $2,720,000. As far as the timeline would go, after this hearing has taken place at the December board meeting, the school corporation would move forward with beginning the technical steps to put the project funding in place that happened after this hearing, and form a technical review committee. We would go out into the marketplace as that technical review committee, and in January we would go through a request for qualifications where any contractor, design build team that wanted to come forward and propose on this project could submit their qualifications. We would then shortlist the three most highly qualified and take them to a proposal phase, and hope to be in a position by the February board meeting to have identified the design builder. And then let's go to the next slide. The selected design builder would work with the school corporation to come to the final scope and budget for the project and bring that to the board in the April board meeting, so we can see construction begin in the spring of 2021 to be completed by the fall of 2022.
Thank you, Mr. Zawanago. I'm sorry. We'll now hear from Mr. Elizondo, I'm sorry, for Stuyvesant and Wilson Company, our underwriter for the project regarding the proposed project and how it might be financed, as well as information about the effect on the typical property taxpayer.
Well, I will continue on where Dan left off. Need one more slide, maybe. Let's see. There we go. So Dan shared with us an estimated project hard and soft construction costs of $2,584,000. When we look at a bond issue, if we had funds on hand in the reserves of the school corporation, that's all we would need. But when we have to look to the bond markets to finance a project, we have an additional cost that has to be incurred, and those are the cost of issuances. If we go to the next slide, our current estimate of those costs are approximately $136,000. That includes the cost of underwriting the bonds, legal opinions, bank trustee fees, all of the things that are involved with the bond issue. Together, that brings us to an estimated bond issue of $2,720,000 to fund this project. including the cost to bring it to the market. Now, how do we finance or how do we structure the repayment of that to you as a school board and tax patrons? The green represents your existing debt service, of which the first 3 years your debt is paying off. The green that extends out past the current 3 years, your debt service fund also can include other items, and currently it does include estimates or expenses from textbook replacement costs. And so we've carried that as a flat number from your current budget, just so that we're all aware that that is part of the debt service budget. But really the first 3 years is where your debt is paying off. So the idea is, if we go to the next slide, we could put the $2,720,000 worth of bonds, lay that on top of your existing debt, and what we would have, next slide, we would estimate that for 2 years, we would have an estimated tax rate increase of approximately 4.2 cents per $100 of assessed value. Then you would see that that tax rate would drop back to our current estimated levels or lower for the remaining period of time. And then finally, as we look at what you're going to consider in resolutions later this evening, or after the hearing, we do set, as the school attorneys pointed out, maximums for the financing. And those maximums are identified as the maximum lease payment. Our current estimate of that maximum lease payment would be $210,000 per year, and that equates into an estimated 9.9 cents per $100 of assessed value as the maximum impact from this project standalone. So if you were to get rid of the existing or the green, that's the highest point that we would hit with this issue standalone. But the important number ultimately is that $210,000, that if you decide to proceed this evening, that will be set as a maximum and cannot be exceeded, no matter how the project moves down the road. It can always be reduced, but it can never be exceeded. We go to the next slide. What does the estimated 4.2 cents per $100 of assessed value mean to you as taxpayers over the next 2 years? If we look, we can't, and if, for those of you that were involved in the public meetings we had, the work session, we had tax calculators where you go look at your individual properties on some other estimates, but today, based on a $100,000 home and a $250,000 home, and then farmland, I've tried to put some estimates together. For a $100,000 home, if you take all of your homestead exemptions, supplemental exemptions, everything, we would estimate that 4.2 cents per $100 of assessed value equates to about 13 3/4 cents, or $13 3/4 of a dollar. It's much easier if I just speak English. $13.75 per $100 of assessed value. That is your monthly, yearly estimate, and the monthly would be a little over $1.15. A $250,000 home, we're talking about $54.65 or 4.55 cents per month. Those are would be for 2 years. That's an annual estimate. That's not a combined for the 2 years. And then, as that prior graph reflected, that rate would then drop back down to in line with where you currently are or lower. For farms, any of you that own farmland, you realize your assessed value is a conglomeration of various parcels, various pieces. So I've given you the formula, if you know your assessed value. The formula is 4.2 cents times your net assessed value divided by 100, and that would give you that annual estimated tax increase. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. We would now open the public hearing. Do I have a motion by the board to open the public hearing this evening? And do I have a second? All in favor? who would like to speak this evening, please let us know to sign the sheet that I have in front of me. As I mentioned earlier, we also ask that you state your name and address and limit your comments to the proposed project and financing, and please keep any comments to 5 minutes or less, and avoid being repetitive if possible. So I do have the sheet in front of me. Is there anybody currently, before we get started, that would like to sign on the sheet? Yes. Do we have a few of those?
Yes.
Good news is that we got the heat shut off. Sorry about that. That's not normal, I get perfect.
Should we get started? What are you looking at? Yeah. Okay. So the first person this evening would like to ask to come up and speak, please, is Mrs. Jamie Mall.
Hi, my name is Shady Mall. I live in North Judson, but I just moved there. I used to live here in Wanatah for 8 years. I have 4 kids, 3 kids in Tri-Township. I have a senior, a 5th grader, and a 1st grader. I agree with lots of people out here, the school needs repair, but that should have been started at least 20 years ago. It's not on any of you guys. None of you guys were on the school board that I know of. The teachers are great, from pre-K, Mrs. Osberger, all the way to Mr. Rudlansky, that teaches math to the high ability kids. And we can't forget about the other staff members in the school, the janitors that do a fantastic job. I was subbing in the cafeteria the other day, and she's not sitting there anymore. But she was working every time I saw her. She had a backpack on, spraying. She was deep cleaning. I was really impressed. And then the other day, I was subbing at Wanatah in the cafeteria as well. And those janitors there were just doing a fantastic job. The Facebook bullying has got to stop. It's been too long. It's going to affect our school system. The public's got to stop bashing each other. If they're going to keep doing it, they need to just rent a room somewhere and keep it off of Facebook. I teach my kids daily to not say anything negative towards anyone else because it's going to haunt them the rest of their lives. It's never going to leave them. Those kids that they bully are going to be, it's going to hurt them. And not only that is the Facebook bullying is going to prevent families from moving here. And then if they do move here, they're not going to want to send their kids here. Mr. Shepherd, he drives a school bus every single day. He picks my kids up at 6:15 every morning. And then he runs a second route every evening. No superintendent's going to do that. He subs wherever he's needed, in classrooms, in the cafeteria. He's sub for gym. He's wherever we all need them. He sweeps the sidewalks when there's rocks on the sidewalks so the kids don't trip. He's out there with a snow shovel, making sure that there's no ice or snow on the ground. Yeah, he hugs the kids, but those kids might need those hugs coming off the school bus. God knows what kind of homes they come from. He only knows, we don't know that. And what's going to happen if Mr. Shepherd leaves our school system? He says, throws his hands up in the air and says, you know what, this is just too much for me. Who are we going to get to replace him? Who's going to drive a bus daily? Who's going to sweep those sidewalks, shovel that, give those kids hugs, sub wherever he's needed again? And I bet you can line up all the kids in our school system in no particular order, and he could name every single one of those kids by name. If not first, by last. I put money on it. But in reality, if he does leave, no one's gonna fill that role. No one's gonna want that role that he's in. After seeing everything that's been out there on Facebook and in the media, we're gonna have a hard time finding another superintendent. And when we do find someone, odds are they're not gonna do what he does daily. Most superintendents sit in the office and just do their math stuff and like actually run a school system. They're not gonna be where we need him to be every day. So I have to say.
The next person this evening will be Lisa Rosencrantz.
Would it be possible for them to stand back farther so they didn't have to wear the mask? People that are watching the recording at home are saying it's all garbled, so nobody can hear what's being said.
Stand back further from the microphone.
If they weren't so close,
I'm not comfortable with that. You're not comfortable with that?
even if the microphone was like put back here so it's not by you?
I don't know if I turn it up anymore, Kelly. I don't know.
I don't-
Katie tried to turn it up a little more, and it got feedback.
I think
so.
it's just the muffled coming through
Yeah.
the masks that people can't hear it.
I think, where's your health department at? What has your health department told you in terms of your COVID?
I think our safest answer is we got one more we're like to do and do the best we can.
If you guys put together, you guys were required by the Indiana Department of Ed to put together a COVID plan that determines what you do.
With the current state of things, we got to err on the side of safety, so we're ready.
My name is Lisa Rosencrantz, and I live at 102 Evergreen Avenue in La Crosse, Indiana. And I would just like to say that to just abandon 22,000 square feet of our historic educational heritage is not only fiscally irresponsible, but completely and utterly insane. It's become painfully obvious that the board has no plan for the La Crosse High School building. Last week at the public work session, Brian McMahon asked Todd Tiger, who is regional director of Indiana Landmarks, which happens to be the largest statewide historic preservation organization in the nation, for suggestions on possible reuse of the building. You could hear the heartbreak in Mr. Tiger's voice when he tried to explain that there are absolutely no options for that building if this gymnasium continues to be used for athletic purposes. You cannot put apartments or retail or anything else in that building due to security concerns because it is attached to this gymnasium. It is very disheartening that the administration has never once taken this into consideration until after they voted to move forward with this plan. It is even more disheartening that the community members seem incapable of comprehending this. So far as to argue that the school can't be used for apartments, then it shouldn't be used as a school either, completely disregarding Mr. Zeiger's statement that the only possible use for that building is the one for which it was intended, a school, because it's attached to this gym. We have never been given any estimates on the cost of maintenance or demolition. All we've been given is empty promises and one suggestion of giving the building to the town. Giving an intentionally neglected building to the town, basically washing their hands of the problem and passing it off to another government entity to clean up the mess. As everyone heard last week from Mr. Zeiger and Ratio Architects, that building can be renovated, modernized, and made safe, which would make it a truly awe-inspiring institution that will serve our community for centuries to come. It is not a dangerous collapse, as some try to portray. According to both Performance Services and Ratio's assessment, La Crosse High School is a well-constructed facility. The original building has a solid foundation and structural system. And both the gym and the school are eligible as registry as a National Historic Place, making them eligible for grants and funding resources from both public and private organizations. But the administration hasn't taken the time to research any of this. We're very fortunate to have our historic building and this gymnasium. This is the very essence of what makes this town a community. And on October 22nd, Dick Cooper admitted that the board has been intentionally neglecting that building for decades, intentionally neglecting the building without regards to your children's on millions of dollars. And in June, Governor Holcomb announced that there will be no cuts to the education budget. In fact, the 2021 budget includes an increase of $183 million. And Governor Holcomb has continued to pledge that he's going to continue to increase Indiana's budget despite Indiana's education budget despite the pandemic. So, if the goal is to increase enrollment, why trade 22,000 square feet for 6, 7, I don't know which changes. When Mr. Shepherd was questioned last week about the lack of room for growth at the proposed Wanatah project, his response, there's plenty of land around Wanatah, which means another $2.7 million project. Also, in his high school proposal FAQ, it states that the kitchen at Wanatah has never been formally evaluated based on space, and it is believed that equipment updates are needed soon, if not immediately. And the condition assessment of the Wanatah building done by Performance Services 5 years ago states that their restrooms aren't ADA compliant either, neither are the locker rooms. The main distribution panel is antiquated and lacks a main breaker. There is no fire suppression system. There is no security system. Also, it was recommended that an additional serving line would be needed, as well as a 500 square foot addition to the cafeteria to replace the seating lost by the additional serving line, and to accommodate the additional high school student capacity. None of this is included in the $2.7 million estimate. Neither were the restrooms originally. Those were included in a $3.5 million package. So, I would like to implore the members of the board to reconsider this devastating decision and take time to closely examine all the foreseeable costs. Most importantly, the cost of disposing of that school, because there has to be a plan for the disposal of that school.
Next individual will be Carrie Gorski. Please bring the floor.
Audio visuals, not my for people at home and for people who stand closer to the mic. So just, yeah.
I'm Kerry Gorski. I live at 5757 West, 2100 South, La Crosse, Indiana. Long-term resident, went to school here. Start my speech. It's not a speech. Questions too. We are all here risking our lives for COVID-19 to fight for or against keeping La Crosse High School in use. Why the rush? I'm here to encourage the school board to reconsider their decision on moving the school to Wanatah. The school board and superintendent are deciding the fate for thousands of taxpayers. Mr. Shepherd said the school was upside down and the cross building was 25% of the problem. Will moving the school fix 100% of the problems? Enrollment, programs, etc. They believe that if they build it, enrollment will increase. Mr. Shepherd and the board do not want a public vote on the issue because when North Judson voted on their problems, taxpayers voted it down. You're trying to shove it through without a public vote. If the school is upside down, building a 5-classroom, moving the high school will not change that. I heard yesterday during the DLGF meeting, Wanatah needs roof repair, possibly a new roof. That could cost up to $1 million. When Tri-Township merged with La Crosse, the Tri-Township money was supposed to be used for La Crosse. Then Cass joined in the merger and the money became Tri-Townships. La Crosse High School is in bad shape because the previous boards intentionally chose to ignore the problems per Dick Booker. Where was the concern for the children's safety throughout those past years? La Crosse High School gives our children a good education, but it needs to be safe. Will moving the school guarantee a better education? 5 classrooms are just the start of the money to be spent. There are too many unanswered questions. Has a consultant been hired to look at all the options? You think that if you build it, they will come? A field of dreams. My father always said, we need an ace in the hole. We need a second option and be allowed to vote. All be safe.
The next individual this evening, Justin Keel, please come up.
When Mr. Shepherd began his job here 2.5 years ago, he handed us each a piece of rope. Remember? Me included, I got one. He said it was a symbol of us being part of a team, and that a rope divided served no purpose. And I'll admit, I thought it was cheesy as heck. But I also thought maybe this was the start of a new chapter. And for a while, it was, or it appeared to be. We worked well together. The newspaper I run worked hard and still tries to strike pushback today to promote the kids and good things that happen in Tri-Township. People try hard to pretend there's no good news, but if you get the print edition and you look at it each week, there's always something positive alongside some of the toughest of pieces. Yet despite promising beginnings, I now know that I was wrong about it being a new chapter. The errors in the past continue on. And as before, the ends justify the means, no matter how wrong. Look at how some of you become closed-minded, bitter and hateful, cold and angry. I've seen some of you jeer and clap when insults were slung against your neighbors that you now hate. One of you even told someone that I should have the shit beat out of me. In conversations with your friends, you call me all sorts of names and derogatory things. I have no doubts that the rest of you wondered maybe what you could do with me with this piece of rope here. My frustration with this process is in the lack of transparency. And to the point that every word that comes out of the school corporation has to be checked and researched, because you made so many misleading statements. I don't trust agendas because things get added last minute. I sit outside every executive session and log how long the closed meetings last, because I don't trust you to keep meetings short and on track. I spend hours researching statutes just to be prepared for whatever wild excuse will throw my way when I make a records request. My trust in Tri-Township is gone. Now that doesn't mean I'm out to ditch you. It just means I won't by default believe what you say until I can prove it to be true. But this isn't a one-way street. When I come with records requests, you make me stand outside like I'm some sort of second-class citizen. Some of you make up rumors about me. You drag down records requests as long as you possibly can, often at taxpayers' expense, just to spite me. When we were writing about schools and the reopening plans in COVID-19, you refused to comment, even when it would have been in your best interest, to brag about how you were handling the situation better than other neighboring schools. You don't trust me. You seemingly tried very hard to make that clear. I encouraged some of you to run for office. You sat across from me and pledged to fight, to do the right thing, to hold the administration accountable, and make things more transparent. And now you're exactly what you set out to fight. You all know right from wrong. And using hours upon hours of closed-door meetings to conduct business is only necessary if you have something to hide or are ashamed of your actions. You all know there will be more projects. You haven't included the cost. Some of you have confided to dream of an athletics facility and more expansions to house the growth you think awaits. Never mind the risk of declining enrollment, the reality of declining enrollment in Wanatah. The naysayers are the blight, not the vision. Never mind the fact that you haven't spent a single taxpayer dollar since 2015, apparently, on studying this matter. The non-believers are just getting in the way. You say that programming can be improved by moving the school to Wanatah, but the fact of the matter is, Tri-Township has never followed through with its programming ambitions. It had a drama program, but that fell apart my junior year. We had Project Lead the Way, a robotics program, which hobbled that. We had a solid agriculture program. Then the principal was keeping it on life support. Now the FFA has 8 kids. The town of La Crosse offered to build a greenhouse, and you passed it up. For what? You paid for Rachel's challenge. It didn't last a year. You used to offer some 40 college credits of dual enrollment programming. Now the school barely mentions it. The page on the website is blank. They have no Spanish teacher, no Spanish club, just an online class that isn't teaching anyone anything. You bought AutoCAD licenses. That class is gone. You had a 3D printer my sophomore year. It's never been used. We had top-notch MacBooks. Now we have Chromebooks. You had a business class that ran a t-shirt business. That seems to be dead too. You promised cadet teaching at La Crosse when the preschool was there. It never materialized. The program got moved to Wanatah. Now it has 10 kids enrolled, and you use K-12 funding to subsidize it. Things are in such disarray. La Crosse's honors diploma graduation rate is now lower than Gary Public School System. We kill every successful program the school has to offer. And I bet some of you didn't even know. But don't worry. We say that we can get an art film or K-12 Spanish. That'll bring kids from Valpo. Moving to high school won't solve your problems. You have to fix those. But instead of pouring your efforts into this vision, if instead you pour your efforts into this vision without knowing what the whole plan is, I believe transparency and accountability is worth fighting for. And you couldn't tell me the timeline last week. You couldn't even say why exactly it would cost $2.72 million. Why that number precisely? This has been a rush since the beginning. It may seem dragged down, but it goes in spurts. Remember you held your first public tour of the school just a week after the surprise announcement at a meeting attended by 4 people because it wasn't on the agenda. You rushed to hold this meeting amidst the worst peak of the most devastating pandemic in a century. You just had to get the job done in hopes that everyone would leave you alone. I know you think that by people speaking out, that we are creating the division that will cause the school system to fail. This is the same cover-up mentality the school corporation has used for years. When someone speaks out about problems on social media, there was another one that went over and some people went off topic as well.
I hope you'll listen to the voices here tonight. What they say matters.
Ms. Kelly, can you please come up?
I'm Kelly Keel. I live at 18 East Main Street here in La Crosse. Not that long ago, Mr. Shepherd sat here in this gym and he asked at a work session saying, I don't know how you all don't know how we got here. You should have already known that this was coming. How could you be possibly surprised? Even back in 2013, the school board member had said it was going to get moved to Wanatah. Well, let me answer how we got here. For over a century, the school has been here at La Crosse. There's been a school here longer than the town itself has been incorporated. For half that time, there have been those that have wanted to close it down. That's 5 decades of people. I was one of those that sat here, actually in this gym right over there, when they said, oh, we're not going to be able to keep it, we're going to have to close it down. 5 decades worth of people never having a reason to clearly justify why we were going to move it. It just keeps getting brought up. Every decade the subject is broached, and then every decade people come out and fight. Then in 2011, the school consolidated, quickly and quietly. Most people didn't even know it was happening until it was already done. Teachers in the La Crosse community were told the elementary was being moved up to Wanatah. Some people believed the junior high was then coming down here to La Crosse to even things out. That never happened, but that's what people were led to believe. Then, in 2012 and 2013, the idea of moving the school was brought up again, taking the high school up to Wanatah. Public meetings were held in both towns, and the voices to keep the school in La Crosse were the loudest. Tonight, Mr. Shepherd had told us back in March of 2013, the board had a vision to move it to a single-wide campus up in Wanatah. That wasn't told to the rest of us. That must have been the vision you all had. Well, not all of you, because some of you weren't here. But it wasn't in a public meeting that that vision was discussed. That's how we didn't know how we got here today. So here we are again. This time, 2 things are different. The first is the board members and Mr. Shepherd have been working hard, just not in view of the public. Mr. Shepherd says he knew all along this is where we were going, treating La Crosse residents almost as if we were dumb. How could we not possibly have known that? Well, the majority of the people had made it quite clear. They wanted to keep the school in La Crosse. There was only a very small minority, those were the ones you were listening to, that chose to neglect the school and ignore the routine maintenance for all these years to strengthen their case. You listened to them, not to everybody. The second thing is different. This time around there's a newspaper that's covering it all. In 2011, when the consolidation occurred, the school board was free to do what they wanted. Those decisions were all made. Public didn't know about it. No oversight occurred. This time that's changed. Now, as the community fights to keep its schools, those that have been deceptive state the newspapers tearing the community apart. Others are quick to blame the paper. They say it's all the paper's fault. Justin Keel's to blame. In the past couple of months, we had one school board member say he's a dipshit reporter. We had another school board member who said anybody who's affiliated with Justin Keel or associated with him is a piece of shit. That's really good to have our school board members think that way about people. When the public is trying to talk.
That's hearsay. We didn't say that, right?
happening in the community. A newspaper's a mirror. It reflects back what's happening. Homecoming, we cover it. Playing sports, we cover it. Going to honor society and get elected in there and put on, we've covered the inductions. We cover academic Super Bowl. We've covered lots of positive things, even though everybody says it's all just the negative. We have covered those things. When the school board decides to hold a public meeting and it lasts 20 minutes, a public meeting that lasts 20, where you're supposed to conduct all the business, well, the other part of the meeting is 2 hours, 3 hours. Yes, we cover that. That's not our fault. If you don't like what's being reflected back through the reporting, stop taking the easy way out. Stop blaming the newspaper. We're merely the mirror. The newspaper is not dividing the community. The actions by the school board and the methods by how they are taking those actions are dividing the community. Start placing the blame where it belongs. If you don't like reading about things that make the school and community look bad, tell the school board to do the job they were elected to do. Represent the community. That's represent the people, not serving your own interests. You, as board members, are elected officials. You took an oath to serve by representing all of us. Not to do behind closed doors, not to do as you please. And if you can't represent the people on this issue, then let the people vote. Take it to a petition of monstrous. Take it to the referendum, but let the people have their voice because you're not listening. You're not representing. So I started by saying, Mr. Shepherd asked, how could we possibly know? How could we possibly not believe that this is where we are today? Well, it's because it's been 100 years. 100 years and we're still fighting to keep our...
Ms. Julie Griffin, can you please come forward?
Can you bring it to you, Julie?
No, I'll
Sure?
get there.
Okay.
Thank you.
Get real close.
Hi. First off, I want to thank the board members. I want to thank Attorney Conrad and Mr. Rollins and Mr. Wanatah, particularly those that came this evening. You gentlemen, I really appreciate the way you did your presentations and your explanations of things. I just wish that that was something that I personally have been aware of more than 6 months ago. I still feel like almost like an outsider. I've been here in the community for 1.5 years. And I have to be honest with you, I've lived in several other states. I've been active in community service as well as participating with city councils and planning commissions and stuff everywhere I've lived. It hurts me to see such a small community of people that have been here generationally at each other. It really hurts me. Just like as we were leading up to the elections, it doesn't matter who you're voting for. You still have to be for your neighbors. This battle back and forth between whatever's going on between you guys, setting yourselves up against the actual people that live here, I don't get it. I don't know what your motives are. I honestly have to agree with some of the things that have been said. My sense is that this entire process is being rushed. You have not looked at any alternatives. If you have, you have not brought that to us to be aware of them. You've given us this one size fits all based on something that you did 5 years ago that said 5 classrooms. I talk to people in the construction industry when I start explaining what it is you're proposing. The first thing that comes out of them is that's going to cost a hell of a lot more than just fixing the systems in the existing school and bringing it up to modernization standards. So I'm not sure where you're getting your information, but I really think you need to back off and take some more time, do some self-reflection like I discussed last week. But you really need to look at all your alternatives. There has to be not just this either or. And then last week you made a comment that once you get everything moved, as if it's a done deal, that you're going to call it Tri-Township. So that means all the schools are going to be called Tri-Township. Is that true? Okay, so there's expense. That's another area of additional expense that have not been evaluated or not discussed. Lots of different costs. When you talk about what's going on here, it's just a matter of upgrading the existing systems that have been neglected over the last few years and modernizing it and bringing it to current safety and ADA standards. But thank you for your time. I do appreciate you all as civil citizens. I mean, you're wonderful public servants. You do things that we honestly have no idea what you do and how hard it is. I get that. But this isn't us against them. I have to agree, you are not hearing the heart of the people that are speaking. And it's not just the people that live here in La Crosse. Every session I've been to, someone has come here from another community that's part of this Tri-Township. Thank you.
Beyond Green.
Hi, Bob Elbreed, 5554 West, 1800 South La Crosse. And I really don't have a written out speech, and the last lady that spoke said it very well. It's not us against them. You guys seem like you got your own agenda and you don't care what what we think. It's just your agenda, and I think, I don't know if Melanie even did, I agree with her as our Prairie Township representative. But if you guys think that being at Wanatah is going to bring a better education, I think you're wrong. I don't understand how that's going to work. And I do think Prairie Township would probably most definitely pull out if that's the way you decide to do. I do know I can do that. So that's all I have to say. Thank you.
The next individual will be Jim Shealy.
This is Jim. This is Jim Shealy. Can you hear me?
Hi, Jim.
Yep, we can hear you.
Okay. Jim Shealy with, I'm Tri-Township resident and at 10263 West, 1850 South, La Crosse. And I strongly oppose this proposal to move the high school to Wanatah. Just want to repeat that. I strongly oppose this proposal. I've considered the members of the board friends and neighbors for many years, and they were elected to represent us. And I'm disappointed that the board has divided the community by holding their meetings in secret under the guise of these executive sessions and springing their school agenda, strategic plan on us with no community involvement or input. I think this ill-conceived plan based on little fact but plenty of assumptions will have a huge negative impact on the community for years to come if passed. It will not enhance or increase programs for the high school students, but the exact opposite. There will be less teachers, less students, and therefore less education funds, and less, not more programs. It will be a disaster for Tri-Township School Corporation, and the facts speak for themselves. With less students and less education funds, the school corporation will collapse. And before you rush into this vote, which you need to look at the recent option that was proposed, merging with South Central's 3 townships. Their education programs would far exceed any programs that Tri-Township alone could achieve. And taxes would not increase any more than their strategic plan proposed, and the Frost would still be able to keep their school. So I think it's a win-win. The school board also needs to swallow their pride for the sake of the students' education and consider all the options before they do their irrevocable damage. And that's all I have to say. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Jim.
The last individual will be Lynn Marone.
She said she might, I think she put that she may be here tonight. Is she here? Is Lynn here? Okay.
In the chat right now. Go ahead and unmute. Betty Hagan?
She's here.
She put it in, will you let me speak? On Jim Hay or other?
Yes, certainly.
Good evening. I'm Jim David, 10802 West State Road 8, cross resident. I ran for school board members, everybody knows. You know, I think I want to make a comment on is that Dewey, La Crosse, and Prairie give me the majority of the votes. I didn't win, but they were expressing their opinion of how they felt. And I think everybody ought to look at that before you make a decision.
Before we move to the next session, or is there anybody else that would like to sign up before we move on? The last opportunity to move. If not, Mrs. Conrad, can you please summarize the next project resolution for the board?
Okay, so what you have before you is a project resolution. And what this resolution sets out, it provides within the resolution the statutory citation with regard to the public hearing which you've had here. And it sets forth that you had the hearing, you listened to taxpayer comments, you had considered proposals that were part of the presentation with regard to the project, with regard to the renovation and the construction improvements for the Wanatah School. It also sets forth that the hard cost and soft cost of the project would be $2,584,000, with the expected estimated cost of issuance to be $136,000, with the total estimate being $2,720,000. So that resolution, it sets that out. It also sets forth that as Mr. Elizondo kind of described in his proposal, that the anticipated impact of that debt service rate fund would be 0.099 per 100 assessed valuation, based on an estimate of $203,791,704 assessed valuation beginning in 2022. So that's all kind of set forward in the resolution. And then what you can do is, based on this, is the resolution that allows you then to move forward in the beginning of this process.
upon what Mrs. Conrad's description of the project resolution and her clarification, at this time I ask for a motion by the board and a second to adopt the project resolution. Do I have a motion by the board for an adoption vote?
Yeah, make a motion to adopt the project resolution.
I'll second it.
We have two motions. Anybody opposed the approval or the motion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion approved. Mrs. Conrad, please summarize the reimbursement resolution for the board.
The next resolution that you have before you is a reimbursement resolution. And what this does is this relates to just the financing of the construction project itself. So what it permits is that the school corporation can reimburse itself from the bond proceeds that will come later for any kind of costs that come prior to that bond proceed being finalized. So it's part of federal tax law that you reimburse yourself in order to preserve what you need to do as a school corporation for that. So that's what that reimbursement resolution will allow you to do.
Again, based upon the clarification that Ms. Conrad provided, I ask the board for a motion and a second to approve and adopt the reimbursement resolution. Do I have a motion by the board?
I'll make that motion.
And do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Motion so approved. The next item would be if there's any discussion by the board that they'd like to have any thoughts shared tonight.
As a lifelong resident of rural La Crosse, I take no pleasure in discontinuing the use of our historical building for our high school students. But in my final analysis and analysis of my fellow board members, it has never been strictly about the building. It's many things other than that. It's about the population of people that have young families in relation to the school's location. It's about potential for population growth in relation to the school's location. It's about efficiencies of having pre through 12 all under one roof. It's about tax dollars being spent wisely. I have heard people quoting Mr. Shepherd's recommendation for the addition to Wanatah as similar to a pipe dream from the movie Field of Dreams. If you know that they will come, which Mr. Gorski referenced earlier. But I find the thought of if you remodel it for significantly more dollars in taxes, they will come to be all more of a pipe dream. Let it be clear, I'm not in delusion that in addition to the Wanatah building will guarantee moving the needle enough to keep our school corporation as a standalone school district. I do feel it gives a better chance than a remodel across for the above reasons listed. But I know it's no slam dunk. However, if we say after 10 years we have not progressed with enrollment and programming, which we all realize is not going to happen overnight, but the likelihood of tax dollars having gone wasted will be so much less if we have an addition to Wanatah instead of here across from the standpoint of I'm not sure who else is going to use this building. The comment has been made to us lately from an official at another school. They wouldn't find another superintendent or school board in the state of Indiana to willingly use this 105-year-old building in La Crosse. Mr. Zeiger further cemented my thoughts last week by stating he struggled to come up with a sound alternative use for the 105-year-old building with location relative to population and potential. I, like my fellow board members, was elected to the board for the Tri-Township Consolidated School Corporation, not the La Crosse Town Board. It's in the best interest of the school district that our kids, that we make this decision. The only thing that I have struggled with, and it's been brought up earlier this evening, is the methodology and course of action, not the final decision. In many ways, I would have liked this decision to be voted on by the public. However, if you at all consider the history of Lacrosse Wanatah's partnership with the number of South Central loyalists in our district and the fact that we have more population in Cass Township than Dewey and Prairie combined, if I'm not mistaken. I wouldn't want you to hold me to that, but I feel a remodel of the Lacrosse building would have never won a vote. And I feel for an addition for a Wanatah facility would be a toss-up. Additionally, as far as the vote is concerned. Additionally, from what we have been told, any kind of such vote on projects would not be a multiple choice. It would have to be first a yes or no for Wanatah, then a yes or no for Lacrosse, or vice versa in order. Then if we have a no vote in both cases, we're sitting here for another couple of years having still accomplished nothing. Nothing will have moved. Something needs to move for this school. The can has been kicked down the road long enough. So love us or hate us, we've taken a stand in the efforts to give Tri-Township and our kids more of a choice, more of a chance, I should say. Believe it or not, we're all committed to the town of Lacrosse remaining the hub for high school sports for as long as possible, hopefully my whole lifetime. But, so where do we go from here? I fully expect for us to get bashed in many ways. The silent majority tells us, whether you believe it or not, there are people on the other side of things. Tell us we make the only intelligent choice. I fully expect those opposed to do everything in their power to destroy Mr. Shepard and Tri-Township schools. On defamation of character, accusations of lying, falsifying numbers, what you have to work with, it will continue. So, certain people can pour over the figures and do anything possible to make Mr. Shepard's life difficult in respect to said figures. I personally don't have the time, haven't had the time to delve into figures ad nauseam. This decision was made on common sense. Our local Lacrosse Wanatah partnership has bucked the system for decades. We still have our independent school today after most schools had to consolidate. So no one can predict the future, but I'll guarantee the efforts to undermine our school and force consolidation will be met with a fight. We are Tri-Township.
My name is Melanie Mills. I represent Prairie Township. My decision based on this is for the long-term stability of our school. We do need the numbers. I know Lacrosse has been deep-rooted and part of a lot of people's hearts. This is a hard decision for me also. But I will go on to say that I've looked at everything possible, the figures. I've asked for figures from people. Mrs. Rosenkrantz, Mr. Gorski, they sent me these things and I asked them. I actually called Mrs. Rosenkrantz and asked her for a number. I didn't receive that. She said that she would get that at some time. She also told me at that time that she didn't want our kids going to South Central. She wanted to keep them at Lacrosse. That was what the save was for the building. I spoke with Bobby, and Bobby and I discussed the kids in Prairie Township. We discussed the goods for staying and my explanations for moving. Like I said, this is a hard decision, but for the best interest in the kids, after I listened to last Thursday with Indiana Landmarks, the Historical Society, when I heard Julie refer to it as a smorgasbord for our schools, it can't be like that. It's got to be the safety first of the kids. This should have been done years and years and years ago. And now I'm stuck in this position making this decision. I never thought I'd be here a year and a half after being on the board making this decision when they've been saying this for 50 years. But going back to that, I had to look at the facts. The facts are, I think it will bring more numbers being in Wanatah. I think that they will have a better education because the education isn't from what building you're in. It's from our teachers and it's from who's teaching them. And I think that's gotten lost with all of this. Amy Welke described it perfectly. It's lacrosse family. It's the Tiger family. It's not the school buildings. I have to agree with her on that. I think also words were put in people's mouths about the bullying. I heard somebody say last week that we were referred to as people emailing us that was considered bullying. No, that was in somebody's words that have gotten twisted once again. I had said, quote, when somebody calls your child stupid, your mother's stupid just like you, that is bullying. I encourage you to look that word up. When somebody calls somebody's mother on the board and complains about a grown board member, that is bullying. When somebody puts a sign in their yard and says, remove shepherd, that is bullying. I will also say, if anyone has met Mrs. Shepherd, she teaches at Wanatah School. I encourage you to meet her. She is the most kind-hearted, working, just like many other of our elementary teachers there. And to have that family slashed, she works with special needs kids, she works from kindergarten to 6th grade. And to have her think she had to pass that sign every day when she's coming to help our children, that's bullying. I have accepted phone calls, I've accepted emails, I've accepted people stopping at my house. I've never turned anyone away. I've answered every call, every private message, everything. Never turned anyone away. I've been on vacation, I've called those people back. Never turned anyone away. So I'm specifically talking to the paper. You have wrote good articles, but you've wrote bad articles more than those good articles. I feel every time you don't get exactly what you want, you're against those people. I was thinking on my way tonight, 5 people came to my mind. You weren't happy with Dick Booker. You slammed him in the paper. You weren't happy with Jeff Mitzner. You pulled him under the paper.
If we tried to do this,
I'm talking.
You know what?
Thank you.
If I had done that, you would have stopped me.
Jeff Mitzner was one of them. You threw under the table.
How come it's okay for her to do it?
Just please keep to your.
No, you would have stopped us to do that.
I'll go on. Okay.
Oh, I forgot. The board gets to do what they want to do.
Jeff Mitzner was one of them. Dick Booker was one of them. Brian McMahon was one of them.
That was never in the paper.
Hey, listen, you have unlimited resources resources.
She's lying.
to talk
She even came and yelled at me at the town hall.
Brian McMahon was one of them. Mr. Summers was one of them.
Yep, you're past your 5.
We don't have, she does not have a limit. That hearing is closed.
Mr. Summers was one of them. Kelly Shepherd was one of them. Now it's board members. Now you please tell me how all those articles are helping our school with misleading information. That's why I'm saying there's been more negative put down in there than positive. So that's where this comes in. It's the paper against everyone else that they're not happy with.
Mirror, mirror
And
on the wall.
I urge you to pull within your hearts and think about what you're doing. Stop dividing, bring us together. A newspaper
Amen.
reaches a lot of people.
You already divided
Please.
it.
Please.
You should have told us what was going on
Thank
instead of
you.
keeping us
Have a
in the
good night.
dark. My name's Sandra Meckley, and I live at 23232 South US Highway 421.
A lot, of course, has been said this evening, and I'll make mine brief. I have been involved in the school systems in the township for most of my life, going on 22 years. And the whole time, the whole duration, I've tried to represent the community that I'm part of with public service. I tried to do what was right for the children, and I tried to do the best thing on behalf, and I know for a fact that the individuals that are sitting next to me and Mr. Shepherd have the same belief, that we're here for the reason we are going through this process because we truly care about the school, we care about the kids, we care about the community to try to do the right thing. And it's not always popular, but we try to do the right thing on behalf of the majority with our hearts, and we have to live with ourselves after the decisions to try to do the right thing, even though, again, it's not always the popular vote. I worked with 3 different superintendents. I worked with many, many other board members during those 22 years, and all the superintendents have all came to the same conclusion after working in this building that something's got to change. We can't last forever. That we have to make a decision, and all the facts have always piled on them. It started with Mr. Kleist when I first started, when I would work with as a trustee for Cass Township. Mr. Summers came on with the same agenda, and Mr. Shepherd, after a brief amount of time, saw the same facts that were written, that he was challenged with keeping the kids safe, making sure our school could sustain itself, to make sure that we were around to provide an education to support the Tri-Township area as long as possibly able to. And it's a challenge that is very, very hard in the current, with the challenges today, especially with all the challenges go around. There's been a partnership and a relationship with Wanatah and La Crosse for many, many years that have existed, and I've seen it before my taking over as a trustee, and also as a board member, and way before my time. And there's been a lot of dedication, and that partnership has lasted to allow us to be existing today. Without that partnership, there's a potential that neither one of us would be in existence. When I was a trustee, even before my time, there were years where Cass Township was in a deficit because of the relationship of La Crosse School and Dewey Township for hundreds of thousands of dollars a year. But the commitment was there because they were dedicated to the partnership and the relationship that we were building, sharing kids, trying to do the right thing, to take care of the children, and try to make sure that our population was taken care of, our kids were taken care of, and doing the right thing. So it's often being said, Wanatah's getting everything, they're the only ones, they're winning, La Crosse is losing, and everybody's losing. When this school closes, if it closes, whatever happens with the resolutions, everybody loses. There's a historic building there that I have many, many cherished memories in. I sat over on the side in 1976 with my aunt in this gymnasium watching, being back when I was 6 or 7 years old, watching the basketball players, and that still is something that I remember today. All those memories and all the history that comes in this gymnasium in this school building means a lot to me too. Wanatah has lost their identity with school colors, and they've lost their mascot. And again, if you look at what happened in 2011 after the consolidation, when the funding formula changed, you look at what things would have looked like today when South Central approached Cass Township and said, we want you to be part of us. It wasn't Dewey and Prairie, that had already been, decision had been made, but we want you to be part of us. What would La Crosse look like today?
what different situation, none of us know, but what would we look like today without our consolidation taking place and with the funding formula changes that affected us when our funding went down 50%. Everybody would be impacted by those things, and we don't know what the result would be when we have 100 plus kids at La Crosse getting 6,500 students. Could we still maintain the same integrity, the same programs for these children? I don't know what the answer is, but I know it would be much more difficult even than it is today since we're in a deficit. We've described all the things since the consolidation because of the challenges with the funding, all the different things that have taken place with the different demographic studies and the surveys and the facility studies and all these things that have been looked upon not only by Tim Hughes but all the board members who tried to sit alongside of me to try to do the right thing to make sure that we were taking care of the children. And many, many times we've had to reduce staff, look people in the eye and affect their families because we are reducing staff just to make sure that we are in existence. And those aren't easy decisions, and that continues to happen and happened as late as last year, that we are reducing staff on a regular basis just to exist. Program which allows us to take care of these kids, to give them what they need. Something that was eye-opening to me that I already knew, but when Indiana Landmarks made a comment that the only other use for the La Crosse school was secondary use is limited because of the location that we're in. We all know the challenges that we're living right now. There's change all around us. We're living in this world where all businesses are struggling. The Sears and the Blockbusters and the companies who haven't adapted or changed. Amazon has taken over the world. COVID is challenging us to try to, more people are working from home. We're all being challenged by change, and change is hard. And this is hard for everybody. But unfortunately, without us trying to look deep inside, to look at the financial restrictions we're up against, we don't know what the future holds with trying to do the right thing based upon the information that we have. And if you look at the town of La Crosse, it was mentioned that over 35 businesses have been lost in this town, in this area within like so many years. It's not the school's responsibility to keep the town open. It's the time and the area and the location that we're in that we're up against. It's a challenge that the school can't. Our job is to make sure the kids are safe and they're getting the education that they deserve. It's not to try to make sure that just the town's open. We need to look at the big picture, to look at what we can do to keep those kids safe and provide the best education so they can have a career and a future. The last thing is that the challenge and why this timing is so critical is interest rates have never been lower. The cost of construction is going up on a large amount every single day. And we have a challenge with the boiler. We have challenges with all kinds of things with maintenance on the building. And as long as I've sat on these boards, like I said, nobody's ever made a recommendation for hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars in that building. It didn't start today. It started years ago because of the recommendation of many of these superintendents that I mentioned earlier that didn't think it was worthwhile spending any money into the building because they didn't know the existence of how long we would be able to keep that building going. There's a lot of good people here, a lot of people that would consider them as friends, and I hope that can exist when this is over, no matter what the outcome is that we are a bunch of people who live in the same community, and we should just try to find a way to resolve this, to try to, even though we aren't in agreement, we're still the same people who were friends before all this started. Ma'am, I'm sorry, but we went through the whole process. We're following the statute.
Okay, I just want to comment that the Tri-Township School reading and math.
Ma'am, I'm sorry that we've already went through that process. I really wish you would have signed up earlier.
I know, I wish I had too.
But I would like to thank everybody for participating in tonight's hearing, and I appreciate everybody's time and investment to make sure that we are going through this process and trying to work to look at the best opportunities for our tax dollars and also meeting educational needs. Thank you for everyone's time and your investment in the community and the school system. At this time, I ask for a motion to adjourn. And second. All in favor? Motion approved.